votes right now, they ain't never been higher than they are right now.
Let tonight be a message to the future.
Two candidates, months of campaigning, and it all comes down to tonight.
Victory.
Midterm.
From Texas's marquee U.S. Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke to the closely watched statewide races, congressional Texas matchups that could change the balance of power in Washington, and state House and Senate seats in play. We have made it to Election Day. Our Decision 2018 coverage starts right now. Welcome to Election Night 2018. I'm Karina Kling. After months of campaigning, millions of dollars spent, and a massive amount of people heading to the polls, we have made it. The polls have just closed across most of Texas, and we are waiting for those first early voting numbers to come in. Of note tonight, after voters were met by a series of delays and difficulties, a judge ordered Harris County to keep some polling locations open an extra hour. That means it could be a while before we get all those results out of Houston. But we do have you covered across the state tonight. In-house, we'll be joined by expert analysts on both sides of the aisle, ready to weigh in throughout the evening. We've also got results scrolling at the bottom of your screen and online all night long. So let's get to Texas's most watched race of the election season. Republican Ted Cruz versus Democrat Beto O'Rourke. The U.S. Senate race is the most expensive Senate race in history. It's captivated a national audience, and all eyes are on these two tonight. Will Cruz hold on to his seat, or can O'Rourke be the first Democrat elected statewide in nearly 3 decades? We've got Cruz on the ground with both candidates. Our Catherine Giese covering Cruz in Houston and Margaret Chadbourne with O'Rourke in El Paso. Let's first get out to Catherine. Kat, a lot on the line for Cruz tonight. Polls have consistently shown the race narrowing. What are you hearing on the ground there today?
Yeah, a narrowing race, but Cruz supporters are still confident, Karina, especially here in Houston, Cruz's hometown. Folks expect him to hold on to his seat, but Cruz is hammering in that message until the last hour, speaking directly to his support base that he knows he has here, urging them to not be complacent, to not expect that historic red win, because the fact is his Democratic challenger, Beto O'Rourke, has made quite an impression on voters, especially new voters, especially young voters. It's been a very interesting and expensive race to watch, but Cruz has said repeatedly that he's not worried, saying over and over again that O'Rourke is wrong for Texas. Now, Karina, as you mentioned, here in Harris County, where I am right now, some folks have an extra hour to get out to the polls. That's because there was some technical difficulties at some of the polling places that caused a delay. So will that extra hour benefit Cruz here in his hometown? We're going to have to wait and see for those numbers to tick in. Karina?
Kat, thank you very much. We will be checking in with you throughout the evening. Margaret Chadbourne is out in El Paso, O'Rourke's hometown. Margaret, he announced his candidacy nearly 2 years ago, and since then has captured national attention. So how is the candidate feeling tonight?
Well, we did hear from the candidate earlier today after he voted at his local precinct with his wife by his side. He said he is ready to win. He's pretty confident going into tonight. Now, despite the fact that this race has narrowed over the last few days, you cannot forget there are several hundred thousands of registered Republicans in this state. It's going to be a long shot for Congressman Beto O'Rourke to unseat Republican Senator Ted Cruz. Here in El Paso, Democrats like the chances. They don't care that he's a long shot. They see a passionate candidate, someone they can get behind. But truly, these voters in Texas, they couldn't have two more contrasting Senate candidates. And we're not just talking about policy issues here, the ones we've heard about on the trail all along, gun control, health care, immigration reform. We're talking about how they are on the trail, their styles as politicians. O'Rourke generates this enthusiasm wherever he goes. He's raised that record amount of cash you talked about. He's built a nationwide following. He's hoping this momentum will make a difference when it comes to younger voters and people who normally don't participate in politics. His campaign needs big numbers from these voters. Here's O'Rourke talking beside reporters earlier today. He certainly appeared confident.
Are you expecting to win?
Yes.
What do you base that on?
I just, don't have a poll, don't have a pollster, just to travel to every single county in Texas, listen to everybody, have so many amazing volunteers that we are working with, knocking on millions of doors, making that human-to-human connection that we're in such desperate need of at this moment of division in the country, bringing people together. I feel it.
Now, it is very clear from following O'Rourke, on the trail that those who are his supporters, well, they're quite passionate about him, clearly here in his hometown. And remember, it was not that long ago that O'Rourke himself was this little-known congressman from El Paso. And tonight, he's all in. He's trying to defy the odds, the math that are in Republicans' favor to become Texas's next U.S. Senator. Karina?
Margaret, thank you very much. And an O'Rourke upset could have a big effect on the balance of power in Washington, potentially. We're also watching several other key Texas congressional races that could tip that balance tonight. It is the first nationwide elections of the Trump presidency, and Democrats have high hopes of taking back at least one chamber. All 435 U.S. House seats are up for grabs, 35 in the Senate. Our Ed Greenberger is keeping an eye on how that congressional map is looking throughout the night. Ed, walk us through who needs to win what to keep or take control.
All right, Karina, and you said it. The Democrats are hopeful they can take the House of Representatives away from the Republicans. This is the House that we're looking at right now. We already have 35 races that have been called. You can see 20 so far for the Democrats, 15 for the Republicans. Here are the toss-ups. 28 toss-up races that we'll be watching very closely. None of them have been called yet, but we want to show you one thing, a couple things that have happened already. First, in Virginia. If I can get Virginia to pop up. There we go. This is our first flip of the night. This was a Republican seat. It's Northern Virginia, suburban D.C. We talked about the suburban women in these districts that might play a big role tonight in that Democratic blue wave that everybody's been talking about. Republicans don't think it can happen. Democrats think it will. Barbara Comstock goes down. Jennifer Wexton, the Democratic challenger, beats her. That race has already been called. So that's one flip. Good sign for the Democrats early. They needed to win that race, and they did. Let's go to another race that the Republicans are watching very closely, as are the Democrats. This is the 6th district in Kentucky. Right now, the Democratic challenger, Amy McGrath, and there are about 50% of the precincts in right now, she leads by about 5 points over the Republican incumbent, Andy Barr. If the Democrats can pick off this race, that's 2, along with the Virginia race, 2 early races that are bellwethers that will have Democrats cheering and Republicans being a little bit worried. Now let's go to the Senate. This is where the Republicans think that they are safe. In fact, this Cook political report already says that they have about 50 in hand. And if they get 50, that's all they need, because the Vice President, Mike Pence, would be the tie-breaking vote. But we can tell you that in Florida right now, Bill Nelson trying to hold off Rick Scott, the former governor, in this race. Bill Nelson, the Democrat, right now he has about a 3 percentage point lead. There are actually about 50% of the precincts reporting in Florida right now. So the Democrats need to win every single race that they hold. The Democrats hold in the Senate right now, and they also have to pick up a 2 Republican races. They have to flip a couple of Republican Senate races to take the Senate. But again, things look much better for the Democrats in the House than they do the Senate. But as we found out in 2016, Karina, we've got to wait and see how this all plays out, because you never know.
Definitely. And with that in mind, polling has long been used to gauge how a campaign is going. But in 2016, a lot of polls got things wrong, as Ed said. But those early polls are showing millennials could win it for Beto O'Rourke. Tonight, we're watching incoming exit polls conducted by Edison Research. Our Jordan Hicks is wading through these numbers for us tonight. Jordan, what are you seeing?
Well, Karina, throughout the year, this has turned into one of the most anticipated Senate races in the country. Turnout has been a big focus for candidates all over. That remains the same here, specifically the youth vote, and that's why Congressman O'Rourke has been running to turn out the vote ever since he started last year. He believes that the low voter turnout in Texas is driven by Democrats, specifically minorities and young people, that feel like their votes don't matter in ruby red Texas. That's why Senator Cruz and his campaign, they also welcome the high turnout. They just believe Texas is still Texas and the turnout won't make a difference. Our first exit polls will give us a look at who could be right so far. Now, so far, Cruz has a slight advantage, sitting at 51 to 47. O'Rourke is winning with voters under 30, but the older you go, the more it moves to Cruz. Voters 30 to 44 are close to split on the 2 candidates. Groups 45 and up are currently favoring Cruz. So that youth vote, just one of many of the keys for O'Rourke if he wants to pull off this upset tonight. Karina?
Jordan, thank you very much. We'll be continuing to track some of those numbers. We do have a stellar panel of Texas political experts joining us all evening. Next to me, Republican Randon Steinhauser and Democrat James Aldrete, and our analyst, Democrat Harold Koch, and Republican Ted DeLisi also weighing in tonight. Let's get right to it. Randon, I'll start with you. What are you expecting, especially when it comes to the race that all Texans are watching between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke?
All Texans, and I would say the nation.
Yeah.
You know, we've gotten so much attention for this U.S. Senate race, and I think Ted Cruz is going to pull it out. I think it's going to be a single-digit win, which we would love to see a double-digit win. But I think he's going to pull it out. You know, those numbers were very interesting. We saw just extremely high voter turnout in early voting. That was something that we saw a lot of enthusiasm both on the Democrat and the Republican side. And there was a lot of question about, were we going to see those numbers also on Election Day? Republicans tend to turn out more on Election Day than early voting. So I think the numbers that we're seeing now coming in give us a lot of hope that it's going to be a good night for Ted Cruz.
Yeah, James, what's your take on that? From the other side.
I think tonight turnout is really the big story. You know, even in the early vote part of it, we saw 500,000 or close to 500,000 new first-time voters. And then there's still another 500,000 that we don't have much background as far as what their partisanship is. And we're breaking records as far as what we've seen in turnout. So all the modeling that's been done either by Democratic or Republican sides has been on a much lower turnout scenario. So we don't know who these new folks are. But the changes is already becoming evident. You have double what we had in as far as vote share of younger voters. You have a drop in 65 and over voters by like 10 points on the early vote aspect. And then what you're going to probably see, and we're going to be watching tonight, is how much of the urban counties creating a buffer for Bethel. And then what you're also seeing is because of that national suburban wave, suburban votes in Texas used to be kind of the bat, you know, to the forehead of Democrats. Yeah. But right now, Bethel's competing very heavily.
Well, and Ted, we'll go to you next, just in terms of what you're looking at for this race tonight, but also as these numbers start to come in, kind of what picture we can gauge from all of that.
Well, Karina, we're already having some early votes here come in Central Texas, and I'll just say I think the trend is very troubling for Republicans. And I think we'll have to kind of see, but I agree with James that I think what I'm looking for tonight is Abbott. We expect to be kind of at the top of the ticket for Republicans, and what is the delta between Abbott and Cruz? And if Abbott's going to have a stronger win, which many pollsters predict, which I think is likely to happen, and then Cruz's race is much closer, what does that mean? Because I think a whole lot of campaigns kind of exist between Abbott's margin and Cruz's margin. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for, and clearly, we'll have to see. I'm looking at Williamson County and Fort Bend County as two kind of bellwether places. Tom DeLay's home county of Fort Bend County and Williamson County, just to the north of us here in Travis County, that has been reliably Republican areas where there are hot congressional races, there are hot local races, and I'm looking to see what the Cruz-Beto numbers are in those counties as a harbinger for what that means statewide.
Yeah, Harold, real quickly, your take. We're going to be coming back to you guys a lot throughout the evening.
Well, look, if I were Ted Cruz, feel good about the early indicators for the evening. This looks to be a very, very close race, and no one should be relying on any polling here, because when turnout patterns are so off and so unusual, you can throw all those polls out the window. We ought to just wait and see what happens, because I think it's going to be a long night.
Might be a very long night. Stick around. You're going to be here with us through it all. We are going to take a quick break. Up next, a look at the race for Texas governor. Welcome back to our Decision 2018 coverage. In an election cycle where Texas has gotten plenty of national attention, one race that's gone mostly under the radar is for the state's highest office. Little known and poorly funded Democratic candidate Lupe Valdez is challenging the well-known and campaign-rich Republican incumbent Greg Abbott. Abbott has mostly ignored Valdez during the campaign. The two only debated once. We do have some early numbers for the two of them coming in right now. It's showing Abbott at about 60%. Valdez at about 39%. Again, those are early voting numbers coming in right now, but Abbott with a pretty good advantage over Valdez. So it shows right now. We do have crews covering both campaigns tonight, and both candidates are in Austin. Let's first get out to our Travis Raychek, who's with Abbott tonight. Hey, Travis.
Hi, Karina. Things have definitely picked up here at the Greg Abbott election night party in downtown Austin. They let supporters and folks in about 15 minutes or so ago when 7 o'clock hit. And expectation, as you mentioned, for Greg Abbott is victory tonight in the governor's race. And he is seeking his second term to lead the state of Texas. And those early numbers kind of indicative of what polling said in the early part of the campaign, that he held about a double-digit, close to 20% advantage over Lupe Valdez. And in fact, you mentioned how he hasn't had to focus as much on campaigning for himself in this election as he's been able to go out and support other Republicans around the state of Texas, going on a tour recently around the state, visiting a lot of places and supporting other Republicans financially, supporting them as well. So we will continue to monitor things out here at Brazos Hall in downtown Austin. We expect to hear from the governor a little bit later on this evening, possibly a pretty early declaration if the numbers continue on in the path that they are headed. But we will bring you all the very latest as it happens here on election night. In downtown Austin, I'm Travis Raychek for Spectrum News.
Travis, thank you very much. We will continue to check in with you throughout the evening. Our Jeff Stensland is covering Valdez tonight. Jeff, Valdez has had a hard time getting much attention, much traction. As we said, you heard from her earlier today. How's she feeling, especially now that those numbers are starting to come in?
Well, I actually was right alongside her when she was arriving here, and those numbers just coming in. She hasn't entered this room where we are right now, but we can hear the area over there. One of her campaign managers actually is in here right now. They sound to be pretty ecstatic about this, and from just seeing him walk around and talk to some different folks here. And they have been pretty positive, at least when I spoke with them earlier this afternoon at a campaign polling location or at a polling place. So she's hoping that she gets a little bit of that Beto boost, as you might call it there. This was her meeting with some different voters here this afternoon in Austin who are going out to the polling places. She says that she's been doing this all over the region. She started out this morning in Austin, went also to Southwest, to San Antonio, her hometown, to go meet with voters there all the way up to Fort Hood. She really hopes that that people who are turning out to the polls will actually favor her and make this a relatively competitive race. Like you mentioned, this race not at all like the one we saw in 2014, where we had Senator Wendy Davis against then AG Greg Abbott. It had a lot of national attention, a lot of statewide attention. This time, it's kind of flown, like you said, under the radar. We are live in downtown Austin at the Driscoll Hotel. Jeff Stensland, back to you, Karina.
Jeff, thank you very much. Again, we will continue to check in with you throughout the evening. We want to bring our analysts back in now. And Harold, I'll start with you. Wanted to talk to you about just kind of Valdez, the numbers that we're seeing coming in right now for her, and how you think this race is going to go tonight.
Well, I think it's going to go about as it was expected to. Look, Valdez is a very nice person. She's actually a very good candidate, but who couldn't raise money, so she didn't really run a full campaign. Now, one thing we're going to be looking at as the evening goes on, I think one of the most interesting things in this election is that it's very likely that there is such a thing in Texas as a voter for Greg Abbott who then turns around and votes for Beto O'Rourke. Now, it seems unlikely on the issues, but voters make their decisions on a whole bunch of criteria. And if polling is to be believed, it could be anywhere from 12 to 14 percentage points worth of Abbott voters who opt for Beto O'Rourke, which I just found is fascinating.
Yeah, early Travis County voting numbers coming in just now, and O'Rourke has now taken the lead, about 53 to 46% against Ted Cruz. Ted, I'll let you weigh in on the governor's race and also just some of those new numbers coming in there too.
Right. I think we've seen this coming for a long time, that we were going to see this kind of ticket splitting, this kind of odd ticket splitting where you vote for U.S. Senate. I think you have to remember that there is a race between U.S. Senate and governor, and it's your local race for Congress. So one of the things I'm looking at, and I just mentioned Williamson County a minute ago, is that John Carter, the incumbent congressman in Williamson County, is losing Williamson County, right? Dan Patrick, sitting lieutenant governor, lost early voting in Williamson County. I mean, this portends to be a very historic night in Texas politics for the Democrats, because we're expecting, the Abbott race, I don't think is necessarily, Lupe Valdez ran such a feckless, ill-funded, and poorly advised campaign that even in this environment, she can't seem to get traction. But every other Republican, including every other Democrat and numerous other Democrats down ballot, are going to have historic nights, I think, because in many ways, we'll see about Beto if he does have coattails, which is an odd thing that Abbott would do well, but yet the Democrats still have coattails down ballot.
Ted, thank you. We are getting some other numbers in. As he mentioned, in the lieutenant governor's race, we also looked at Dallas County, again, early voting. Dallas County, not Travis County, they're telling me some of those numbers coming in. But Justin Nelson also ahead of Ken Paxton, and as Ted said, Mike Collier ahead of Dan Patrick currently. What's your takeaway? Again, these numbers are early.
Yeah, we're going to beat that horse dead tonight. It's early. We can't predict things too soon in the evening, and that's really important to keep in mind. The narrative that I would say outside of the Abbott and Beto voters, because that's a really interesting narrative tonight to kind of see how that plays out, is the fact that because Greg Abbott was not in a highly contested general election, he was able to really help some down ballot candidates. And he spent over $1 million of funds to help these down ballot candidates. So in his sense, he wants to make sure that he has a supportive legislature coming back into the session. And one way he was able to really make himself effective on the campaign trail was to help some of those down ballot candidates.
Yeah, James, your take real quick.
Yeah, I want to give Lupe her due, because what we've seen in the early vote from 18 compared to 14 is a 4% jump of vote share for Hispanics. So we have a much higher Hispanic turnout than we did in 14, and Lupe has been a large part of that. Second, ground zero in the Texas House is going to be Dallas County. And her strength there currently on the early vote in Dallas County alone, maybe not running a competitive statewide campaign, but in Dallas County alone, she's doing very well in the early vote against Abbott, and that's going to see some effects down ballot.
Yeah, those numbers still close, and again, as we keep saying, still early. I think we're going to be here a little while tonight. Thank you very much. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, a look at that Central Texas congressional contest that's gotten national attention. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Decision 2018. Turning to a Central Texas congressional race that's garnered national attention. U.S. House District 31 has historically been a Republican stronghold. It covers all of Williamson County and parts of the Bell. But Democrat and war veteran MJ Hagar has gone viral with a video about her biography and given 8-term Republican incumbent John Carter a real race. But can she pull off an upset? We are getting an early look at some of those numbers, as we mentioned in the last segment. But there you see MJ Hagar ahead right now with that early vote, 50.6 to about 47% for John Carter. Again, those numbers are early, but pulling ahead so far. We do have crews camped out with both campaigns tonight. We want to first get out to our Rena Diamante, who's covering Carter. Rena, what's been Carter's final midterm message, and any word on how people are feeling about these numbers?
Well, throughout this campaign, we've heard Carter say going into this race, he's not too worried, and that's certainly how people here at the Williamson County Watch Party felt, at least until 20 minutes ago, until we saw those early voting numbers. Supporters here are saying that they are off to a rough start, but they are staying hopeful. Congressman Carter is trying to hold on to a seat that he's held since 2002, and before that, he was a Williamson County judge for 20 years. And Carter believes, and as well as his supporters believe, that he knows this district well. They know him and they know his record. We're talking about bipartisan efforts. We're talking about him helping veterans. Supporters acknowledge that he does face a tougher than usual race against Air Force veteran MJ Hagar, but they believe that national attention will not affect a local race. Let's take a listen.
Certainly his opponent, with a lot of New York and Hollywood money, has brought a tremendous amount of money into the district and into the race, and we can't take that lightly. But Congressman Carter has a great record he's run on, and I'm very confident and hopeful.
Congressman Carter is expected to address this growing crowd here at the Wingate Hotel Conference Center in Round Rock. When exactly that will happen all depends on those returns. We'll be watching those closely. For now, let's send it back to you in the studio.
Rita, thank you very much. And our Carlos Garcia is following Hagar tonight. Carlos, what's she saying about her chances, especially given some of these early numbers that we're getting a look at?
Well, Karina, they're very optimistic, but I got to tell you, anything that happens tonight will come down to voter turnout. And boy, a Democratic flip in deeply conservative District 31 could have serious implications for the dynamic of the entire Texas congressional delegation for elections to come. Now, I want to talk about how conservative this district is. We're talking about the entirety of Williamson County and most of Bell County. President Trump won them by double digits. Now, Mitt Romney got twice as many voters as President Obama back in 2012. So when we talk about a strategy for a Democratic victory here tonight, it really means stepping up, getting out the vote efforts. Now, we're keeping track of the results as they continue coming in. And Karina, before I send it back to you, I do want to mention one other thing. District 31 is relatively young. It's been created, it was created back in 2003. No Democrat has ever won that seat since its creation. Will that change tonight? Who's to say? The night is still very young, Karina.
Still young, and we will continue to keep an eye on it. Carlos, thank you very much. And we are continuing to keep an eye on all those early voting numbers. We're back with more right after this break. Welcome back to Decision 2018. Turning to a Central Texas congressional race that's garnered national attention. U.S. House District 31 has historically been a Republican stronghold. It covers all of Williamson County and parts of Bell. But Democrat and war veteran MJ Hagar has gone viral with a video about her biography and given 8-term Republican incumbent John Carter a real race. But can she pull off an upset? We are getting an early look at some of those numbers, as we mentioned in the last segment. But there you see MJ Hagar ahead right now with that early vote, 50.6 to about 47% for John Carter. Again, those numbers are early, but pulling ahead so far. We do have crews camped out with both campaigns tonight. We want to first get out to our Rena Diamante, who's covering Carter. Rena, what's been Carter's final midterm message, and any word on how people are feeling about these numbers?
Well, throughout this campaign, we've heard Carter say going into this race, he's not too worried, and that's certainly how people here at the Williamson County Watch Party felt, at least until 20 minutes ago, until we saw those early voting numbers. Supporters here are saying that they are off to a rough start, but they are staying hopeful. Congressman Carter is trying to hold on to a seat that he's held since 2002, and before that, he was a Williamson County judge for 20 years. And Carter believes, and as well as his supporters believe, that he knows this district well. They know him and they know his record. We're talking about bipartisan efforts. We're talking about him helping veterans. Supporters acknowledge that he does face a tougher than usual race against Air Force veteran MJ Hagar, but they believe that national attention will not affect a local race. Let's take a listen.
Certainly his opponent, with a lot of New York and Hollywood money, has brought a tremendous amount of money into the district and into the race. And we can't take that lightly. But Congressman Carter has a great record he's run on, and I'm very confident and hopeful.
Congressman Carter is expected to address this growing crowd here at the Wingate Hotel Conference Center in Round Rock. When exactly that will happen all depends on those returns. We'll be watching those closely. For now, let's send it back to you in the studio.
Rita, thank you very much. And our Carlos Garcia is following Hagar tonight. Carlos, what's she saying about her chances, especially given some of these early numbers that we're getting a look at?
Well, Karina, they're very optimistic, but I got to tell you, anything that happens tonight will come down to voter turnout. And boy, a Democratic flip in deeply conservative District 31 could have serious implications for the dynamic of the entire Texas congressional delegation for elections to come. Now, I want to talk about how conservative this district is. We're talking about the entirety of Williamson County and most of Bell County. President Trump won them by double digits. Now, Mitt Romney got twice as many voters as President Obama back in 2012. So when we talk about a strategy for a Democratic victory here tonight, it really means stepping up, getting out the vote efforts. Now, we're keeping track of the results as they continue coming in. And Karina, before I send it back to you, I do want to mention one other thing. District 31 is relatively young. It's been created, it was created back in 2003. No Democrat has ever won that seat since its creation. Will that change tonight? Who's to say? The night is still very young. Karina?
Still young, and we will continue to keep an eye on it. Carlos, thank you very much. And we are continuing to keep an eye on all those early voting numbers. We're back with more right after this break. Welcome back to our Decision 2018 coverage. We are getting a look at some of those early voting numbers. We want to pull back up the U.S. Senate race and take a look at some of the numbers that have been coming in from that early vote. Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, it's showing Beto O'Rourke up right now about 51% to Ted Cruz at about 48%. Again, early numbers, we're continuing to keep a close eye on that, but some interesting developments in that race. We are also continuing to watch some more exit polling that we're tracking tonight. Our Jordan Hicks joins us from the newsroom with a look at some new numbers. Jordan, what are you looking at?
Well, Karina, we're taking a look at the first round of exit polling based on race. Big issues like immigration, as well as the recent terror attacks in the news, have made race a hot button issue once again. Now, Senator Cruz has been pushing a tough on immigration agenda, falling in line with President Trump on most issues. Congressman O'Rourke opposes the border wall and supports a Clean Dream Act. Let's see how their positions affected the polls. Now, again, this is the first round of exit polling. Again, Cruz with the slight overall lead at 51-47. So far, the breakdown on race is as expected. White voters so far favor Senator Cruz. O'Rourke is seemingly running away with the black vote. He also has a pretty strong lead among Hispanic voters as well. Now, these are figures that both campaigns likely expected, but the real key will be turnout. If O'Rourke can get those communities to turn out in large numbers and vote for him, he could pull off a historic upset. Karina?
Jordan, thank you very much. And we want to get to some other races where early voting is, those numbers are coming in. Let's start with U.S. House District 21. That's the contest between Republican, just kidding, that's Roger Williams and Julie Oliver. That's House District 25. Roger Williams with a good lead there over Democratic challenger Julie Oliver. She's at about 38%. He's at about 60%. Let's go now to the race for District 21. That's for retiring Congressman Lamar Smith. Joseph Kopser, the Democrat there, ahead over Chip Roy, 53 to about 44%. And lastly, a look at District 10. I think we have those numbers. That's the race between Michael McCall and Mike Siegel. Michael McCall, the Republican incumbent there, still up with quite a big lead. Again, those early voting numbers coming in closely. And we do want to get back over to our Ed Greenberger, who's keeping track of what's going on around the nation when it comes to all of these seats that are up for grabs. Ed, what are you seeing right now?
Well, Karina, what we're seeing right now in the House of Representatives, the race looks pretty good if you are rooting for the Democrats. Remember, we came in 195, whoop, didn't mean to move that over there. Let's move that back. All right, 195 seats. That's what the Democrats had coming in, the 240 for the Republicans. The main, we're just getting an update right now. That's what happens when it happens. All right, we're trying to get to 218. That's the magic number. The Democrats need to get there to take control of the House. And how do they do that? They need to gain 23 seats. And that means they need to flip a lot of these Republican districts. And they have already done that twice. Let's first show you what's happening in Florida. This is South Florida. This is where Ileana Ross-Layton, a longtime Republican congresswoman, retired, so the seat was up for grabs. Donna Shalala, the Democrat, this race has been called. Shalala has flipped that, so that's one that's gone from the Republicans to the Democrats. We also want to show you the Kentucky 6th District. This is a very close race right now. It's about 70% of the vote that's in, and Amy McGrath, the challenger, the Democratic challenger, just ahead of the Republican incumbent Andy Barr by 0.5, half of a percent right now. If the Democrats take this one, that is huge for them because everything right now in the House looks like it's leaning toward them, and this would be a sign if they could take the Kentucky 6th, this is a toss-up district, that things are really going the Democrats' way. Let's take a look at the Senate. We've got a lot of races going on so far. We've had a couple called, nothing that anybody is surprised about. Tim Kaine in Georgia, the Democrat, and we have Bernie Sanders in Vermont, which I just pulled up. I didn't mean to do that, but let's take a look at Florida because this is the race that everybody's looking at right now. The incumbent Bill Nelson taking on Rick Scott, the former governor who's trying to flip that seat, and the Democrats need to hold on to this and all of their other races that that their incumbents are in tough races. And right now, about 71%. Actually, it's a little bit higher than that, and Nelson still has a slight lead. It's very close, but there are a lot of votes from South Florida, from Broward County, Miami-Dade County, that still haven't come in yet. Those are Democratic areas, so Bill Nelson and the Democrats are hoping that they can take this race. But even if they do, it's still a tough road for the Democrats to get to the 51 seats they need to take control. But right now, early on, the story is in the House. Good news for the Democrats, but we still have a long way to go. Karina?
Ed, thank you very much. And when we come back, a look at the race between Republican Will Hurd and Democrat Gina Ortiz-Jones. Welcome back to our election coverage. It's considered Texas's key swing district. District 23 is huge, and even the smallest towns can make or break a candidate. Republican incumbent Will Hurd is trying to hold on to his seat against a strong challenger in Democrat Gina Ortiz-Jones. We do have some of those early numbers to put up. Hurd holding on to a lead there at about 58%. Gina Ortiz-Jones at 40%. Again, these are early voting numbers that are coming in. But again, the Republican incumbent holding strong there to a lead against the Democratic challenger. We do have crews covering both of these candidates tonight. We want to get out to our John Garcia, who is covering Gina Ortiz-Jones. John, what can you tell us?
The mood here remains quite optimistic despite incumbent Republican Will Hurd starting out with a strong lead tonight. Gina Ortiz-Jones, along with other Democratic candidates, are expected to take the stage here at the Herrera Plaza later on tonight. Now, our cameras caught up with Jones earlier today as she was getting out the vote. Jones campaigning until the very end today, knocking on doors on the city's far west side, reminding people to vote. The newcomer to politics is a San Antonio native and who was an Air Force intelligence officer for 14 years. She says if she wins, it'll be another opportunity to serve once again.
But again, this is about public service. And if you can vote against your constituents in Washington like he did, and then you don't have the courage to explain to their face why you did that, I think that shows you exactly why we need new public servants in Congress, not people that are beholden to their corporate donors like Will Hurd.
Now, many people here anticipating the results will be in their favor. Now, something to keep in mind, this congressional 23rd district is massive. It stretches from the Alamo City all the way to El Paso. Most of the polls close at 7, except for 2 counties where many are still open. That's in El Paso and Hudspeth County. Their polls close at 7 our time, 7 Mountain Time. Reporting from the west side, John Garcia, Spectrum News.
John, thank you very much. We want to bring our analysts back in. Randon Steinhauser, James Aldrete, Harold Cook, Ted DeLisi. Make sure I get all your names correct. But let's get to some of this. Randon, I mean, we're seeing some of these early voting numbers coming in. Surprised?
Not quite. I would say, you know, the Cruz O'Rourke race is really battleground number 1. I would call this our battleground number 2 race. A couple of interesting things about this to keep in mind is that she's a very qualified candidate, and she was someone that I think when she stepped up to challenge Will Hurd was taken very seriously in that. He also won his last election by 1 percentage point, and part of his district covers El Paso, which of course is home of Beto O'Rourke. So there may be an enthusiasm there that helps her take it over to the win.
Well, James, what's your take on the Gina Ortiz Jones / Will Hurd race and others that we're watching?
Well, I mean, on the Gina Ortiz and Will Hurd, he's always tried to distance himself from Trump and make his own kind of independent path. Even the road trip he did with Beto was to kind of show that he's his own person. So he's one of a handful of open-minded on immigration Republicans that have done that. And then you're also talking a different demographic that goes from San Antonio all the way to the border to El Paso.
Yeah, Ted, we saw that kind of influx of cash last minute in this kind of showing maybe some signs that Will Hurd could be in trouble. What's your take on where things stand right now?
Every Republican in a competitive race or perceived competitive race is in trouble tonight. I think that there's absolutely no question. This has been, and I think, look, Will Hurd, I think, kind of pound for pound is one of the best candidates that the Republicans have. I think he's kind of done all the legwork in this like kind of heavily rural district to try to make inroads into this district. And this is one of those congressional districts that kind of unfortunately has come kind of in and out with the tide, depending upon kind of what the wins are and for what party. But I think what we're seeing tonight with, you know, the early returns for, you know, bad returns for John Carter, bad returns for Chip Roy, who's running for Lamar Smith's seat, you know, really troubling trends across the state. I'm just hard-pressed to think that in a district that's this competitive, even though there's a great candidate in Will Hurd, that he can kind of withstand that kind of, you know, gale force winds that we appear to be watching this evening.
Harold, I'm going to have you stand by for just a second. We're going to go out to our John Salazar. We do have his shot there. He's out there with Will Hurd. John, what can you tell us about how the Republican is feeling out there in San Antonio tonight?
Well, I can tell you that his supporters are now showing up in droves as they've seen some of those early numbers already come back, and definitely Hurd does appear that he will win this district race, coming in with 60% of the early vote, and compared to Gina Jones with 38% of the vote. But it is still early, but it does look like he is in the lead to go ahead and claim that district. Now, Hurd has voted with the Trump agenda more than 90% of the time, and that's according to political watchdog groups. Now, on the Russian investigation, he has criticized the president for not siding with the American intelligence community, who all agree that the Russians did meddle in the 2016 elections. On immigration, the congressman, while he spoke against the federal government locking up immigrant children in cages who were waiting to be processed. And then when we're talking about the wall, Hurd says that technology should secure that border, not an expensive wall.
I've been very clear that building a wall from sea to shining sea is the most expensive and least effective way to do border security.
Now we are waiting on the congressman to arrive, but keep in mind that we're also waiting for some of those results to come back from El Paso. Those will come back at about 8:15. We'll have more numbers after that hour. Then we'll just wait to see if Congressman Hurd comes in and begin to address some of his supporters who've showed up early. Back to you guys in the studio.
John, thank you. And I just can't reiterate enough that these numbers are early, so nothing has been called yet. We will be right back with more Decision 2018 coverage. Welcome back to our Decision 2018 coverage. We want to bring our panel of political analysts back in. Again, Republican Brandon Steinhauser and the other Republican, Ted DeLisi, and Democrats James Aldrete and Harold Cook. We just were talking a little bit during the break about the race for Attorney General. Brandon, I'll start with you. Justin Nelson pulling ahead right now. Again, early voting numbers coming in, still coming in, but about 50% to 47% over Republican incumbent Ken Paxton.
Yeah, again, too early to tell. But I think, this is one of those statewide races that a lot of Republicans are keeping their eye on because there has been sort of a cloud around Paxton in this race. Nelson had a huge fundraising toward the last quarter. So this is definitely a statewide race where we're keeping our eye on it and hoping that Paxton can pull it out.
What's your take on this? And Justin Nelson, the candidate, the race that he's run in this, and just kind of how he could possibly do tonight?
I mean, obviously, it's been a couple decades since we've had Democrats win statewide.
Yep.
But you hit a level of success when a Republican statewide incumbent is doing negative ads against you. And Justin hit that part of it. So clearly, I think there's a huge differential between Paxton and Abbott numbers, between Cruz and Abbott numbers, and between even Dan Patrick and Abbott numbers. And so those are kind of the weak links there. Justin is, a well-accomplished and recognized lawyer, and then when you have, Paxton's legal problems, it provides a real stark contrast.
Yeah, Ted, well, let's go up to you. What's your takeaway on kind of where things stand with that race right now?
I heard about this race. I mean, Republicans have understood, and if you look at the ethics reports, you can see that Dan Patrick actually made a $250,000 contribution to Ken Paxton, I want to say 2 days ago. The governor knew that Paxton was in for a tight race. Paxton's tracking polling, which is a sample of 200 voters that's taken every night, showed that this race was tightening significantly. This is no surprise to the Paxton team. And the reason for it is that Justin Nelson raised enough money and ran an ad about Paxton's indictment. I mean, that's just as simple as it can be. Paxton did try to fight back and fight back forcefully, but in this environment, with the bloodbath that we're seeing on behalf of Republicans, this is going to be a very closely, a hotly contested race. And I'll just say this, I think that the Cruz race and the Paxton race are going to be incredibly close. And if you look at traditional Republican suburban areas, Ken Paxton's wife is running for the state Senate seat that he used to have. She won her home county early voting of Collin County 52-48. I mean, this is not your normal Collin County, Denton County, Montgomery County kind of numbers that have propelled candidate after candidate into statewide office. So I think we're going to be up late tonight watching the results of this, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of these South Texas counties or large urban counties, if they report weight, could be the deciding factor in these races.
Harold, I cut you off last time around. Your take on the Attorney General race, but just others that were watching it and takeaways from what Ted's saying.
Well, I agree with Ted. This may not be the only statewide Republican who goes down or comes very close to it. It's going to be a very late night for a lot of these people, especially if they didn't comport themselves well to voters. And in the specific case of the Attorney General, he pretty much spent the entire election hiding from voters, and he's not the only one. It probably won't be as bad for the lieutenant governor as it will be for the Attorney General, but it might be for candidates like the Ag Commissioner, for example, who didn't even bother to run a race. He just trusted that Republicans always win, so I'll win. And this is not a good night for this sort of thing. If you didn't work for it, and if you didn't fund it, it looks like a very, very tight race and a light night for you. Now, back on the congressional race, the Will Hard race in Congressional 23, he is in the lead right now, but I'm not sure that's to be trusted for very long. He split Bexar County so far in early voting with a slight lead, but that's not what he needs out of Bexar County. When at the other end of the district, El Paso, 0% is in from El Paso because they're in a different time zone, right. And they are just going to kill it for the Democrat, and a lot of ports in between is going to be rough on Hurd. He may well pull it out, but it's going to be a late night for a whole bunch of Republicans, and he's one of them.
Harold, hold that thought. Randon, I know that you wanted to weigh in on this, but I think a lot of what we've been seeing too is just a lot of the Republican incumbents running like Republican incumbents and not really acknowledging their Democratic opponents. Was that going to turn out to be a bad night for them after all.
Well, I think we have to keep in mind that these are early votes that we're seeing come in. So one of the interesting things about Ken Paxton is that he is very closely aligned with Donald Trump. He's an attorney general that's worked very closely with the Trump administration. He's been very out front on Obamacare and repealing that. So if our Republicans turn out, if the turnout today on Election Day, which is traditionally higher for Republicans to turn out, he may be able to bounce back from that. Again, so these early voting numbers are really, we expect those to be a little bit higher for the Democrats. But again, this is certainly already showing to be a historic night and could be very well disappointing for a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, record turnout, as we've been saying. We'll see what happens for the actual Election Day turnout and whether that is up there with presidential levels. Hold all of those thoughts. We are going to take another quick break, but stick around. Plenty more election night coverage when we come back.